So I'm making a great books list of 100 great books. Here's the top 10 or so that I got so far. Aliyah Al-Mahdi, that's the woman who posed nude with the Egyptian flag raised over her head, with the Sharia is not constitution um, written on her body. So it was an awesome, badass protest. But number one is life. It's the great works, not the great books. And life is a great work. It's a great work of art, a work of reality, a work of consciousness, and womanhood. So Leah Al Mahdi interjected the woman's body into the conversation because of her protest. The Higgs boson, it's a thing. It's a great work. What constructed the Higgs boson? What is the Higgs boson? Where did it come from? Rhythm Zero. I gotta find the author of that, but her, I think not Ina Shevchenko. It's another woman, but it was just a demonstration to show the barbarity of humans when you take away all their defenses. The Kentucky Constitutions, all four of them. In fact, actually, I put a fifth one in there. There's a Confederate Constitution. They've had 5 constitutions, whereas America's only had one. And we've been operating on the 1891, but it has a very specific way to get a constitutional convention, which is revolution. It's how you consolidate the revolution. You get a constitutional convention. Selma, MLK movies coming out here shortly. So that'd be number 5. I'm using contemporary art and works, which is a slap in the face of the traditional great books. A Transistor, it's a great work. Whoever created a transistor, he's talking about the great ideas as being just love, power, evolution, just ideas, right? Beauty, and that doesn't really show any type of progress of humankind. That just, he couldn't think of any black authors that could think of love or freedom or liberty or equality. He couldn't think of any. He had no black, brown, or yellow people. Very little women. He thinks a bunch of dead white men should be read and studied, and he was a racist. So fuck Mortimer Adler. I don't know if I've mentioned that or not, but Mortimer Adler is a fucking racist, white supremacist, fucking dickhead. And I've heard Tupac talk better about love than what that asshole talks about. Noam Chomsky, 9/11, A Combustible Engine, Stephen Hawking, A Brief History of Time, Albert Einstein, Relativity, The Special and General Theory, Euclid, Elements, Sudbury Democratic Schools. Those are just some of the top ones I've been considering, because I am not happy with the top 100 or the great books of Mortimer Adler's. He's kind of an asshole. At the end of the 1920s, Bohr, Heisenberg, and Pauli had worked out the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, but it was rejected by Planck and by Schrödinger, Lau, and Einstein as well. Planck expected that wave mechanics would soon render quantum theory, his own child, unnecessary. This was not to be the case, however. Further work only cemented quantum theory, even against his and Einstein's philosophical revulsions. Planck experienced the truth of his own earlier observation from his own struggle with the older views in his younger years. A new scientific truth does not triumph by convincing its opponents and making them see the light, but rather because its opponents eventually die and a new generation grows up that is familiar with it. The Gay Science. This is a Nietzsche book I put in. I actually took down Thus Spoke Zarathustra. I want to make my list concise and meaningful and accessible, so people will want to read. So I've considered some seemingly made for children's books, but they are about revolution, where Hope for the Flowers is about revolution. So The Gay Science is the most personal of all Nietzsche's books. Contains the greatest number of poems in any of his published works. What if some day or night a demon were to steal after you into your loneliness, and say to you, this life as you Now live it and have lived it. You will have to live it once more and innumerable times over. Would you not throw yourself down and gnash your teeth and curse the demon who spoke thus? Or have you once experienced a tremendous moment when you would have answered him, "You are a god, and never have I heard anything more divine"? After Buddha was dead, people showed his shadow for centuries afterwards in a cave, an immense, frightful shadow. God is dead, but as the human race is constituted, there will perhaps be caves for millenniums yet in which people show his shadow, and we still have to overcome his shadow. Whither is God? He cried. I will tell you. We have killed him. You and I, all of us, are his murderers. Here's some bullshit by Aristotle. This just shows you how fucking stupid the great books are. You know, all these dead white men. Aristotle, it just fucking, it's I feel creeped out just reading his fucking words. Written in 350 BCE, translated by S.H. Butcher. So Aristotle, he proposed to treat poetry in itself and of its various kinds, noting the essential quality of each to inquire in the structure of the plot as requisite to a good poem, into the number and nature of the parts. Man, Tupac could fucking write better about poetry than this fucking asshole. Eminem could talk about, you know, poetry better than this asshole. He's already bored me. Sorry, Aristotle. So he wrote Poetics, and it was like one of the great books. It's a philosophical treatise to focus on literary theory. Aristotle offers an account of what he calls poetry, a term in which in Greek literally means making. In this context, includes drama, comedy. Oh my god! So it's not even poetry; it's poetics. What the fuck? I want to talk about Aeschylus. There wasn't many of the classics that I thought was worth redeeming. I thought it was pretty embarrassing, actually, the list that Mortimer Adler had come up with. Yeah, we do need, the greatest ideas that mankind's ever thought about, but it's not the ideas that he, beauty is subjective, right? So how much more do you need to talk about it? And it's in the eye of the beholder, or is there actual and categorical imperative of what beauty is? So think about, those big ass philosophical ideas, and you basically got the essence of Mortimer Adler. But he's very myopic in scale, and there's a huge problem. I can't believe I actually took 7 minutes to say this. Let's do this. There's a huge problem I have with Mortimer Adler, and this is the problem. Okay, so I have this. The Nietzsche Family Circus. It is my ambition to say in 10 sentences what others say in a whole book. So the whole thing distills down from Mortimer Adler. It was just beauty, love, goodness, evil, evolution, shit like that. He doesn't talk about scientific achievements, scientific advancements. He basically just says which authors talked about beauty the best, and just talked about different books that talked about beauty and what his ideas of those ideas were. And he was very much wanted a general education focused on the classics. So he was all about the dead white men, the Romans, and all these fucking so-called scholars. Like I said, I cut out pretty much all of them. There's only a couple of them that I kept. There's Aeschylus, and the reason why I kept Aeschylus is because that was Robert F. Kennedy had quoted him after MLK was shot. And so truth, goodness, beauty, liberty, equality, justice. These are the 6 best fucking ideas of Mortimer Adler, and he says the 3 top ones are ideas we judge by. So in his idea, he thinks truth is a judgment, goodness and beauty is a judgment, and liberty, equality, and justice are ideas we act on. So we act on freedom, equality, justice. He didn't even fucking mention equality when he first came up with this fucking list. He forgot to mention all the black people. Of course, he didn't mention equality. He didn't want blacks to have equality. And he says that these are ideas that we act on. It's my ambition to say in 10 sentences what others say in a whole book. So Mortimer Adler, let's pull up one of his fucking quotes about love. He's weirder fucker than Aristotle is. But Mortimer Adler, he had fought education's child-focused curriculum and vocation-centered training. So he's against Booker T. Washington. He's against child-focused curriculum such as Montessori, Reggio Emilia, Sugata Mitra. Just going down the list, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. So he's against child-focused curriculum. What kind of curriculum are you focused on if you're not focused on the child? Of course, you got to follow the child. They are able to think for themselves. Vocation-centered training. Some people would say that's the only type of education there is. When you can make a skill. You have a trade. You walk out with a trade, you can get paid. When you went to school and you didn't learn a fucking trade, how the fuck are you going to get paid? So that's Booker T. Washington. That's the industrial arts, and so because he fights against those things, automatically he's automatically wrong. You need an education that encompasses all of this. General education in the classics. What the fuck he says is classic is different than what the fuck I say is classic. There's lots of classic shit that has come in our recent times that is worthy of study and makes every fucking thing that Mortimer Adler said completely irrelevant. So we don't need to learn any more about the great books. You just need to, read the great books, the 100 great books that I list, and come help me make a list, next year, and then we'll continue making this 100 greatest books list every year. And it's not even just the greatest books; it's the greatest works. Because I'm sort of rebelling against my own parameters here. I'm saying books, but we have five senses, and books are not just the only one. So really, there's sight, smell, hearing, taste, and touch, and therefore the greatest works should be based upon those five senses empirically. That's all we can interpret the world from. We also have our imaginations, right? So that's what beauty and love and justice and talking about those ideas, those general concepts. That's a good idea. Nobody's arguing with that. And he put a bunch of scientifically looking novels together, and he did a scientific approach, and he's trying to say that he's a fucking genius. So it took it was okay, like love. He's talking about love, desire, eros, philia, agape, in Latin words, amor, amicita, and caratus. There's only erotic or amorous love that involves sexual desire and activity, but even erotic love is benevolent and is concerned for the enjoyment of sex by the loved one. Sexual activity devoid of benevolent impulse is not love, but lust, and lust, like greed, is a mortal sin. So there's some Christianity for us, right? It's a sin. Love is always altruistic, not selfish. And altruism is impossible. It's always self-interest. Only children and childish persons ever misuse the word love for selfish desires, saying I love candy or I love popcorn. Love is more altruistic than justice. Justice is primarily negative. Its precept being not to judge or harm others. Justice is love. Love is justice. But love is entirely positive in its precepts. Aristotle told us that if all human beings were friendly, justice would not be necessary, for if they loved those whom they thought admirable, they would be benevolently disposed towards them. Yeah, okay, so love, he's got, in Mortimer Adler's got nothing to say on. Here's what somebody said. Slow to the point and obtuse, this book is a full-blown bore. Great ideas rendered poorly or shabby still from top to tip. The only saving grace is that I could at least throw the book. Adler's probably too big a windbag to throw. Aeschylus is a playwright of ancient Greece, the earliest of three greatest Greek tragedians. He wrote plays, so Aeschylus was a playwright. So Robert Kennedy and MLK got shot, and Robert Kennedy gets up to the crowd and he says, my favorite poet was Aeschylus. He once wrote that even in our sleep, pain, which cannot forget, falls drop by drop upon the heart, until in our own despair against our will comes wisdom through the awful grace of God. What we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but love and wisdom and compassion toward one another, a feeling of justice to those who still suffer in our country, whether they be white or whether they be black. We're not hearing a lot about Aeschylus today. Aeschylus knew tragedy, wisdom through the awful grace of God is an amazing line, one that not only subverts an idea but also an emotion. Wisdom through the awful grace of God. Kennedy only spoke briefly, and it was, wonderful. So Aeschylus was the man that he had quoted. Aeschylus is a tragedian. Sophocles and Euripides. Here's some of the shit that Aeschylus has said. So the great Aeschylus. His resolve is not to seem, but to be the best. But when the dusk has drunk the blood of men, no resurrection comes for one who's dead. Success is man's god. So in the Libyan fable, it is told that once an eagle stricken with a dart said when he saw the fashion of the shaft, with our own feathers, not by others' hands, are we now smitten. Of all God's death only craves not gifts, nor sacrifice, nor drink offering poor it avails no altars hath he, nor is soothed by hymns of praise. For him alone of all the powers of heaven persuasion holds aloof. O death, the healer, scorn not thou not, I pray, to come to me. All right. His resolve is not to seem, but to be the best. Success is man's God. I'm not impressed so far. Here's a quote. Compare Einstein. The best. That is the way to learn the most. That when you are doing something with such enjoyment that you don't notice that time passes. That's how you learn the best. Here's more of Adler's great ideas. Talking about freedom. He's a dumb shit though. He forgot, black people need equality and they need freedom. Couldn't think of any black person could talk about freedom. He's so fucking stupid. I think actually, the Booker T. Washington, I've come to appreciate it much more because Booker T. Washington was, I guess the first inevitable step. And if you can get industrialized education, trading, vocational training, you're able to make people dependent upon your services. And that is a way to come up from slavery. And Du Bois was kind of a shit talker. He was kind of a shit talker. And I actually think of the dichotomy between MLK and Malcolm X and W.B. Du Bois and Booker T kind of in the similar strains of thought. Quantum theory. Max Planck come up with quantum theory. And I'm not sure. I think Einstein might have been against it. Max Planck and Einstein were like best buddies. So the origin and development of the quantum theory. My task this day is to present an address dealing with the subjects of my publications. I feel I can best discharge this duty, the significance of which is deeply impressed upon me by my debt of gratitude. God, I'm bored, man. So, quantum theory. Where is science going? Albert Einstein wrote a prologue. Many kinds of men devote themselves to science, and not all for the sake of science herself. There are some who come into her temple because it offers them the opportunity to display their particular talents. To this class of men, science is a kind of sport, and the practice of which they exalt just as an athlete exalts in the exercise of his muscular prowess. There's another class of men who come into the temple to make an offering of their brain pulp in the hope of securing a profitable return. These men are scientists only by the chance of some circumstance which offered itself when making the choice of career. If the attending circumstance had been different, they might have become politicians or captains of business. Should an angel of God descend and drive from the temple of science all those who belong to the categories I have mentioned, I fear the temple would be nearly emptied. But a few worshippers would still remain, some from former times and some from ours. To these latter belongs our Planck, and that is why we love him. I am quite aware that this clearance would mean the driving away of many worthy people who have built a great portion, even perhaps the greatest portion of the temple of science, but at the same time it's clear that if the men who have devoted themselves to science consisted only of the two categories I have mentioned, the edifice would never grown to its present proud dimensions. No more than a forest could grow if it consisted only of creepers. But let us forget them, and let us fix our gaze on those who have found favor with the angel. For the most part, they are strange, taciturn, and lonely fellows, and in spite of this mutual resemblance, they are far less like one another than those whom our hypocritical angel has expelled. What has led them to devote their lives to the pursuit of science? That question is difficult to answer and can never be answered in a simple, categorical way. Personally, I'm inclined to agree with Schopenhauer in thinking that one of the strongest motives that lead people to give their lives to art and science is the urge to flee from everyday life with its drab and deadly dullness, and thus to unshackle the chains of one's own transient desires, which supplant one another in interminable succession so long as the mind is fixed on the horizon of daily environment. But to this negative motive, a positive one must be added. Human nature always has tried to form for itself a simple and synoptic image of the surrounding world. In doing this, it tries to construct a picture which will give some sort of tangible expression to what the human mind sees in nature. That is what the poet does, and the painter and the speculative philosopher and the natural philosopher, each in his own way. It's a good. So a little bit of Einstein. Okay, so Aeschylus, he's a tragedian, the father of tragedy. He has like 8 works. He had 70 or 90 of them. Only 7 of the 90 plays he wrote survived. And Prometheus Bound, we don't even know if he actually wrote it. Prometheus bound. There's a debate over the authenticity. The play is composed almost entirely of speeches and contains little action since its protagonist is chained and immobile throughout. Prometheus bound. So I guess he was bound. This is when Prometheus was bound. Oh shit. At the beginning, Kratos' strength, be of force, and the smith god Hephaestus chained the titan Prometheus to a mountain in the Caucasus, with Hephaestus alone expressing reluctance and pity, and then departing. According to the author, Prometheus is now being punished not only for stealing fire, but also for thwarting Zeus's plan to obliterate the human race. This punishment is especially galling since Prometheus was instrumental in Zeus's victory. Right. So there's that. That's one of his plays. That's one of the great works. Orestia is a trilogy of Greek tragedies written by Aeschylus. Concerns the end of the curse on the house of Atreus. When originally performed, it was accompanied by Proteus, a satyr play that would be performed following the trilogy. Proteus had not survived. The term Orestia originally probably referred to all four plays, but generally is used to designate only the surviving trilogy. God. The name derives from the character Orestes, who sets out to avenge his father's murder. So more Orestra, you have Agamemnon. The play Agamemnon details the homecoming of Agamemnon, king of Argos, from the Trojan War, where you had the Helen of Troy, the fucking female asshole that started the whole fucking thing. I wonder if she even felt bad about it. Waiting at home for him is his wife, Clytemnestra, who's been planning his murder partly as revenge for the sacrifice of their daughter, Iphigenia, and partly because in the 10 years of Agamemnon's absence, Clytemnestra has entered into an adulterous relationship with Aegisthus. Oh, goodness gracious. So, you know, that happened. The libation bearers. The introduction to the libation bearers is as thusly. The Eumenides is the final play of the Orestia, in which Orestes, Apollo, and the Ares go before Athena and 11 other judges chosen by her from the Athenian citizenry of the Areopagus rock of Ares, a flat rocky hill by the Athenian Agora, where the homicide court of Athens later held its sessions to decide whether Orestes' killing of his mother Clytemnestra makes him guilty of the crime of murder. So it's actually fascinating. So Orestes is tormented by Erinyes or Furies, chthonic deities that avenge patricide and matricide. He, at the instigation of his sister Electra and the god Apollo, has killed his mother Clytemnestra, who had killed his father, King Agamemnon, who had killed his daughter and Orestes' sister, Iphigenia. So basically he killed his mother, but she had killed his father, who had killed his daughter and Orestes' sister. So if he was justified in the killing, I don't know. When does the killing stop? An eye for an eye makes the world blind. A murderer should be put to death, but can't there be a justified one? Because I mean, if she killed the daughter, this king, then perhaps she was just, and then that would make him unjust. So you really got to unfold that story, find out the guilty of that one. So the libation bearers, it deals with the reunion of Agamemnon's children, Electra and Orestes, and their revenge. Orestes kills Clytemnestra to avenge the death of Agamemnon, Orestes' father. It was his mother. He killed his mother. So Aeschylus, killing mothers. Nietzsche Family Circus. Get some daily Nietzsche. A casual stroll through the lunatic asylum shows that faith does not prove anything. Mass energy equivalence, E equals mc squared. The mass energy relation states with that the universal proportionality factor between equivalent amounts of energy and mass is equal to the speed of light squared. This also serves to convert units of mass to units of energy, no matter what system of measurement units is used. If a body is stationary, it still has some internal intrinsic energy called restant. Well, we'll get to that later. Reggio Emilia, that's where you have 100 languages. So if you want to know what Reggio Emilia is, you just gotta, read these articles. For many parents of preschool aged children, the beginning of the school years can be scary. When your child starts going to school, it means less parent involvement in day-to-day learning and more teacher-structured lessons, less play, and more work. But a growing form of early childhood education called the Reggio Emilia approach is turning heads with its unique take on teaching, one that makes parents, teachers, and children equal shareholders in the learning initiative. Although Reggio Emilia is an Italian import or export, it's not, as you might expect, a fancy cheese. In fact, it's an approach to education from a city of the same name, and it focuses on the educational importance of community and free inquiry as its primary value. Since its development in the 1940s, the Reggio approach has spread to a worldwide network of preschools and kindergartens with designs for elementary classes in the works. Although the Reggio approach shares some of the values of the better-known Waldorf and Montessori schools, it's not a philosophy with a set system of beliefs. Rather, it's an approach based around certain fundamental values about how children learn. These values are interpreted in different schools, different contexts, in different ways, says Susan Lyon, executive director of the Innovative Teacher Project, which aims to develop and promote Reggio-inspired education. What are these core values? Well, here's an introduction. This is actually a really good one because it only lists like five fucking core values. The parent is an active participant in the learning. I don't want to say it's probably more than that. The child is very competent, protagonist, initiator who interacts with their environment. It's not willy-nilly. Students in her classroom show an interest in building, so she brought wood stumps and building materials. Bam. Significant to the environment. The environment of the school is seen as the third educator, after the parent and the teacher. The environment teaches you. And it does. In fact, some people say the environment is what governs you. You're governed by your environment. Psychic determinism, where you're at, where you're placed. You don't ever get away. You can't ever get out. You try to get out, they pull you back in. Most Reggio classrooms include a studio and atelier. It's filled with materials with clay, painting. The parent, teacher, and child's collaborators. Again, I think we already said that, making learning visible. So the environment and the 100 languages. They totally forgot about the 100 languages. Reggio Emilia believes there's 100 languages. Every person has 100 different ways to speak. So not languages, but I was looking for some Kentucky, Reggio Emilia, and it's I and then M. So I don't see any. There are no Reggio Emilia inspired schools in Kentucky. So if you're in Kentucky, you're fucked. If you're looking for, some Reggio Emilia inspired school, because there's actually no democratic schools in the entire state. Sudbury Model School, a private school in Louisville, is trying to start up, but besides a private school, none of the public schools are. That's from the Commissioner of Education. There are no schools that are democratic in Kentucky. They're all fascist, totalitarian. All sciences are now under the obligation to prepare the ground for the future task of the philosopher, which is to solve the problem of value, to determine the true hierarchy of values. Nietzsche's all about the reevaluation of values. He's also about the will to power. When one has a great deal to put into it, a day has 100 pockets. I want to end off with a good one here. All credibility, all good conscience, all evidence of truth come only from the senses. The 5 sentences. So he's an empiricist. Morality is the mediocre are worth more than the exceptions. Oh, the mediocre. The mediocre always attack great spirits with violence. That's what happened to Ron and Lee Smith. A bunch of mediocre motherfuckers. This is what is hardest to close the open hand because one loves. Sometimes the pictures. Many are stubborn in pursuit of the path they have chosen. Few in pursuit of the goal. One last Nietzscheism. Surface is the disposition of woman. A mobile, stormy film over shallow water.